Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. It's me, GhostCritic, and I'm here with the second of the year's comic book reviews. I have a heartier pull list to chat about with you this week. Last week was a little lackluster on my pull list. So there's lots of books to talk about. For those of you who this is the first video you've ever seen, just be warned, spoilers are in effect. I'll be talking storylines, cliffhangers, what's going on with the characters. So if you've not read any of these books yet, then either stop the video, rush off and read it, come back, or just fast forward the video until you see that particular comic book taken down and on to the next one. I don't want to spoil anything for you. This week has been a strange week with comics. As you can see from the title, it's called Near Misses, and it kind of encapsulates not just kind of, I don't know, missed opportunities or just near misses within the actual storylines themselves, but I kind of got this feeling as I was reading the books of almosts. This, I think I said in the last week's comic book review video that normally I would do like from my worst to my favourite comic, my pick of the week, but sometimes comics are so closely, so close of a quality that it's difficult and a bit unfair for me to kind of put them in a kind of ranking order. So I'm kind of dismissing that this year, but you will get my pick of the week right at the very end of the video, so stay tuned for that. So we're going to kick off this week with a DC title. It's issue 38 of Joshua Williamson's The Flash, and right off the bat I want to make a request to DC. Please keep Scott Collins on this title. I love the artwork in this. If we can't get Scott Collins, cover artist Barry Kitson will do just as fine. The thing that I actually like most about Scott Collins, and I don't know if he does a lot of his inking himself, but I can't see another name for an inker in the credits. But I think I've come to, I guess, appreciate or like or love or drawn to those inkers that kind of put that, they're not heavy-handed, but that you can clearly see the kind of the black outlines around figures, which if you're not noticing this until now, and I've spoiled, taken you out of it, I'm sorry, but I kind of really dig it. Chris Bachalo does this all the time, and I love his artwork. He's one of my favourite comic book artists currently, and has been for many, many, many years. But I just really dug this style that Scott Collins was doing. It just kind of leapt from the page. It wasn't too detailed, it wasn't trying to be too clever with the whole kind of Speed Forcey lines like, you know, on here, which is very subdued for what we have seen in many previous issues of this title. So yes, keep Scott Collins on this book for a while. It's an artist that I'm aware of. I don't think I've read much that he's ever drawn, but I know he's out there, he has his fan base, and he has done a lot of work previous to this. Now let's talk about the book. It's strange because it feels like a jumping on point, because the first page, the intro page, it's kind of like catching up the reader of what has been going on over, say, the last couple of story arcs. But in fact, this is the last part of the latest story where our rogues are once again trying to pull the wool over Flash's eyes and get away with, you know, a big heist kind of deal. We get the culmination of Flash and Captain Cold's battle fight in this basically a freezer box. Captain Cold has trapped Flash in this, it was basically a freezer, and he obviously the cold is subduing Flash and he can't use his powers, so Captain Cold is trashing the Flash, basically, not giving him a chance to recover and make an attempt at fighting back. But in a kind of not so surprising way, the Rogues have yet another traitor in their midst. We already have seen Turboyne, who at the start of this storyline, which kicked it all off, having been murdered because he was going to kind of snitch on the Rogues and let Wolf, who runs Iron Heights, know what's going on. So they killed him. But it is, of course, Godspeed, Flash's ex-partner August, who has been that kind of dubious hero-villain type of character, and we see it more here. And he's been biding his time to find out what's the connection between the Rogues and Copperhead, and where they're sending all of Captain Cold's freeze ray guns. The thing about this book is that, I mean, I know it's the Flash, I know this is quick-paced, but the stories seem to be over too quick. This was done in like 3 issues. I don't know how DC are going to kind of put these stories together in a trade, but however, it does kind of set up, because all the while we're getting these snippets of like sub-storylines, storylines for future use. We've got the kind of setting up of Copperhead's boss and who that is. It's not Copperhead that's running all this. She has someone that she is taking orders from. We've got Kristen, who's kind of Barry's current partner at Iron Heights, and the reveal that she is attempting to gain Wolf's trust at Iron Heights to find out what really is going on Iron Heights. So that's clearly a storyline that's going to come up soon. But I think most of all, this story has been, and it concludes at the end, about second chances, and I guess in a way of penance. Flash has always had the guilt of kind of not getting to his mother in time before the Reverse Flash, Evan Thane, killed her. You've got Godspeed, August, kind of wanting redemption in a way for being basically a bad guy. And we get this wonderful scene at the end with Barry at his mother's grave, and you think at first that he's talking to her like her graveside, and explaining, he wants forgiveness. He knows it's not going to come easy, and he just wants that second chance. But in fact, he's talking to Iris, who's standing on the other side of the grave, and it's just a lovely reveal. And hopefully, we can move Flash on to more jovial storylines. However, I don't think we're going to get that. DC loves it going back to its darkness again. It's kind of gritty storytelling, but I'm enjoying the crap out of this book. Let's move on to another DC title, this 12-issue maxi series from Tom King and Mick Gerard, Mr. Miracle issue number 6. And look, there's no denying that this book is incredibly clever. There's a big element of meta-ness about it. But there are moments that I get the feeling it's just trying too hard to be clever. This particular issue centres on Mr. Miracle and Big Barda escaping his death penalty. We saw in the last issue a kind of Mr. Miracle had given up and an acceptance of his fate, and by the end of that issue, Big Barda turns it around and makes him want to fight for his life again. So we see them making their way through many dangers, attempting to reach Orion in the hope that they can talk to him and change his mind. And there is a lot of talking going on in here, juxtaposed between a lot of action, which again, predominantly shown in their fascination with the 9-panel grid, and all the while they are talking about home renovation. It's a very casual conversation given what is actually going on visually. They're talking about smashing, as they're smashing through walls to get to the next part and get closer to Orion. They're talking about extending living rooms and kitchens. There's a kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There's a quote that. One of the two, I can't remember who it is now, but they say making things smaller doesn't always make them better, and you just have to think, well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're making these panels incredibly small, and if not to emphasize that point, some 4 pages later on they are trapped in this room that's shrinking, and as the room is shrinking, the panels get smaller and smaller and smaller, and yes, again, it's very clever, it's very ingenious, but it's kind of like 2 on the nail. It's like a setup, reveal, and of course there is the big finale to this current story arc, because this is kind of seen as, I've read it's kind of like the end of season 1 of Mr. Miracle, where they eventually, after going through all these kind of trials almost, kind of rooms full of lasers, underwater, big kind of kraken fish type things, and just basically guards in general stopping their way to Orion. We see him in his kind of, I guess, throne room, and he appears dead by the hand of Darkseid. And then we get this idea of the apocalypse trap. And again, it's that Mitch Gerard doing that art style that as soon as Darkseid seems to come on, the colouring changes and it gets all kind of fuzzy and like it's a TV show that's not tuned in properly. And so you get this idea that everything that's going on potentially, not necessarily might be in his head, but it's more of an illusion. And every time you kind of get that push from Darkseid, the illusion cracks somewhat. Like I said at the top of this, there's just no denying it's a very cleverly laid out conceptual book. The storyline is a bit out there, but it's fun. I'm not denying that. I think the hype, as I said before, it's a bit too much for what this book actually is, but it's nice to see that Tom King and Mitch Gerard are having a lot of fun playing around with the medium of the comic books, just whether it's storytelling, whether it's the art style, the paneling, the layout. I'm obviously going to keep on getting this. It's a good read. Colin Bunn's XMen Blue issue 19, and another part of our Cross-Time Capers storyline. And wow, do X titles love to do their time-travelling tales. Whether it's in the past in a kind of what-if way, or if it's in the future, what could be, they just can't help themselves. And this is basically what we've got with basically the whole storyline, but certainly with this issue, with our teens going back to their kind of original, what we think is their original timeline, just after they were plucked into our present, their future. And what we see now they're back is a supposed young X team, as if they were back from the future, but they are now somewhat deadlier, and so we have this conversation between all the X characters. Is this X team them back from the future, which is our present, but changed from the experience of being in the future? Something that I've kind of mentioned in previous videos, that if this title was ever to finish, and I don't see it finishing very soon. There are still solicitations for this going on to March and beyond, but what a kind of title that would be, having RX teens going back to the past and having new stories in another title where they have that knowledge of the future and how it affects their new adventures back where they started from. Of course, we know these X people, whoever they are not the real deal. We've already been kind of fed that in previous issue, but we've got to have this lengthy talk about it. And while there is kind of like some action in here, it's very exposition led. The irony at the end of this is laid on so thick, where our X-Men have to team up with the past version of Magneto. Anyone reading this book know they're kind of teamed up with him in the present. And then we get the reveal of an unfamiliar kind of brotherhood of evil mutants. So it's kind of like, is this an alternate timeline? As with all X titles, they're a whole heap of crazy mess, and obviously, you know, if they get too mired into the whole, oh crap, they went back in time and did all this, oh, it was an alternate timeline, it doesn't matter, and this is kind of what this feels like. And so it kind of almost feels a bit of a throwaway story. Apparently this gets concluded in the next issue, so it's going to be interesting to see how, you know, Colin Bunn wraps this crosstown caper up, and what are the implications going forward. Another Marvel title, Daredevil, issue number 597 of Charles Soule's Mayor Fisk storyline, and it's a confusing old time over in Hell's Kitchen right now. And it's kind of like, although I'm interested in what Soule is doing here, I have to say it's kind of a slog. We have the whole idea of like the world looking on, and some superheroes and not so superheroes kind of trying to get their head around why Matt Murdock is agreeing to work with Wilson Fisk. Remember, this is now in the kind of present Marvel universe where everyone's forgotten that Daredevil is actually Matt Murdock. And so you've got the likes of kind of Punisher and Spider-Man wondering, you know, why are they siding with him? And then obviously Foggy is just like, what the hell are you doing? And on top of that, you've got Daredevil saving people, you know, street level style, who eventually turn on him because there's a bounty now on Daredevil's head. There's a reward for his capture. They kind of shoehorn back in the whole Inhumans storyline that we had a while ago with Muse. And we get the Inhuman detective come back in to let Daredevil know that, oh crap, Muse has escaped, so, you know, look out for him. And of course there's the whole blind spot sub-storyline going on there after Muse blinded his newly acquired sidekick. But it's kind of like, whose side is Muse on, as he kind of plasters this side of the building in a kind of Nixon-esque pose, you know. If I could just find it, yeah. At the back, the whole "I am not a crook" quote that we know from history. But it's been the same, and I keep mentioning this about Daredevil. I wish someone would listen. But there's a lot of talking in Daredevil. It's all kind of the lawyers, the courtrooms. And I just want some more action. This book is called Daredevil. It's not called Matt Murdock Lawyer. So, you know, I just long for the days of, you know, the action adventure inspired, with his kind of using a lot more of past rogues gallery of Daredevil. You know, throw in Mr. Fear, throw in the Owl. Typhoid Mary, all those great characters for him to go up against. And let's kind of cut back on the courtroom drama-esque TV showness of Daredevil. But you know, Daredevil is one of my favourite characters over at Marvel. I will continue to buy this to see where it goes. We're coming up to the milestone 600th issue of Daredevil, which concludes this storyline, and then we'll see where Charles Soule, if indeed he is still on that book, where it goes next. Let's look at an Image title now. It's Stray Bullets from David Lapham, issue number 31. And oh god, I love the insanity of this title. At times, it is just so nerve-wracking reading this book. Lapham has got tight hold of these reins of storylines. In this issue, he kind of pulls those strands so they just like almost touch, but not quite to manage to keep this story, this crazy, almost farcical story going on and on and on, and I'm just astounded by the control that Lapham has on this book. Unlike Daredevil, which has got kind of all these storylines going on and it feels all a bit of a chaotic mess, there's a lot of storylines going on here, but because they're so intertwined, it doesn't feel as chaotic. It feels more nerve-wracking, as we've got basically Kretschmeyer and Annie holed up in some sort of cabin, getting his brother to kind of go cold turkey, but Kretschmeyer is bored and he's off out to look for trouble, which is never a good thing, and basically leaves Annie to look after the junkie brother. We've got Scotty, who enlists a new player to retrieve his cash and his drugs, where Nina, Beth and Orson are in another motel room deciding their next move to kind of lie low for a while, stash the cash, stash the drugs, take a little bit of the cash, go kind of like, I don't know, to Mexico or somewhere, lie low until it's all low, till it all dies down, and then go and retrieve the money and live happily ever after. After everything that's happened to them, how they think that is ever going to be a thing is beyond me, but you know, live the dream. And it's like the stories, they all start converging on the motel that Beth and Orson are at, as our bounty hunter is out making inquiries, gets closer and closer to the motel. We've got Kretschmeyer and Annie also getting closer to retrieving what they think is their cash and drugs, but Annie's kind of torn between Kretschmeyer's violence and just wants away with these young kids. And Annie's kind of like, no, you can't. As much as their relationship is stretched, and they have this kind of love-hate relationship, Annie certainly doesn't want to see her daughter killed. And we have this new bounty hunter coming to the motel that they're at just as Beth decides, look, we've got to get out of here quick. And Kretschmeyer manages to shoot this bounty hunter dead, but not realising that Beth and Orson are in the motel. They are that close to getting this money and the drugs that they want, but they just kind of drive off into the distance while this kind of rainbow is in the sky and everything's all kind of like happy. But it's just, oh, it's so well done. You must read this, catch up, get the trades. It's a wild ride that when you open the first page, you never know what you're going to get. You know, you see this on the cover, it doesn't even kind of hint at what might be going on in the book, but once you turn that page over, you're kind of like sucked into this madness that goes on in David Lapham's mind, and I'm here till the very last page. So The Punisher didn't make it to pick of the week, but it was still a fantastic read. Matthew Rosenberg is doing a fantastic job on The Punisher. Here with issue 220, he gets the character, and that it's not always just about the action, the explosion, the fights, although there's a great deal in here, obviously, because it's a Punisher title. He gets that although he's on this mission to kind of clear up the mess that a post-Shield group have made in this East European city, Frank always seems to end up helping the kind of little people, and although, you know, he'll shoot down the bad guys in a blink of an eye, he will kind of blind people with just his hands. He has this, I guess you'd call it a benevolent side. The story starts with him helping this young man who's kind of been chain ganged into, I guess, Petrov's army, or at least going to this prison camp where they are being taken. And throughout the start of this book, Frank is going out trying to find out the location of Petrov. No one seems to know where he is, so he decides that if he can't find out what Petrov is, he's going to make Petrov come to him. And he completely obliterates this prison camp, releases all the prisoners within it, and then this bunch of similarly armoured guys turn up, and it's the ingenuity from Frank who realises, and not just the fact that he's got this kind of onboard AI voice within the suit telling him, you know, the odds against you kind of beating these guys are slim to none. It's the ingenuity from Frank that keeps him surviving. He knows there are too many people, too many of these guys in the armoured suits. He knows that they have much more experience in using these suits, but he will use everything and anything to get to his goal. And although all the ingenuity in the world doesn't particularly save Frank at the end of this, it's just great to watch him battle against the slimmest of odds. At the end of this, we have these guys take down Punisher, have him falling into the ocean, presumably to sink to the bottom, and it's kind of that, how is Frank going to get out of this this time? And just a great rollicking adventure with lots of, as I said, explosions, action, fight scenes. It's just a great book to just let it wash over you. It's just a fantastic ride. Love this book. So it's not without some element of irony, given that I've just spoken about a very kind of bombastic, big, action-packed comic like The Punisher, that my pick of the week is kind of like at the opposite spectrum of that. I am, of course, talking about Jeff Lemire's Royal City, issue number 9, because this is just the most emotional roller coaster of a title I've read in some time. It's as if Jeff Lemire has kind of got a spoon, scraped the inside of my head out, had a good look at it, past, present, perhaps future, and then just thrown a lot of very identifiable characters onto the pages of Royal City. We start with the story of Pat. Pat is our writer, who we saw in the first story arc as an adult, who's kind of got this writer's block. But here we see him back in the 90s as a much younger man, just having left school. And I think that at some point in your lives, everyone can relate to what kind of Pat has been through. I certainly can. And that's the kind of need to escape what is the seemingly inevitableness of life, to have those kind of dreams of a better life, a better future, a better job while you're stuck in a kind of dead-end town. Pat here, you know, through the voice of Tommy, you find out that Pat is a smart kid. He has good grades, he plays sports, he's got these aspirations to be a writer, but he's kind of resigned to the fact that he is going to be staying in Royal City for the rest of his life. So when school ends, when all his family is expecting him to go off to college, he does nothing about it. There's no real explanation from Jeff Lemire here, but I think that is kind of the point of not telling us, in that, you know, it's obviously a reason in Pat's head, but it can't be explained. What ends up, you know, he slobs about for a while. His parents get sick of this, and eventually his dad sends him off to work in the factory that he does, just like everyone else does in Royal City. As I said, this is all told through the voice of Tommy, his younger brother, and we get this sense of anger at his brother, that he's wasting his opportunities, his experience. He's kind of dashing his dreams of doing better just because there is this thought process that basically you go to school, you work in the factory, you have kids, you get old. And he kind of sees in his brother that, oh, maybe his brother is smart enough to realise to stop fighting this inevitability that, you know, this is what happens to people in Royal City. But by the end of the story arc of Pat here, as he speaks to one of the other workers in the factory, who can't believe that this smart kid has come to just work in a factory when he knows he's better, and those words clearly mean something to Pat as he goes into his father's office to say, look, you know, I'm quitting. You know, it's his first day, but I'm quitting. And he has this realisation that he's going to go away. He's going to get out of Royal City. He's going to make something of his life. And while it's so well shown by Jeff Lemire here, there's like panels of his father's face who, while he's looking at his son, you're going to get this anger and disappointment. But as Pat leaves the office, his dad has this smile on his face, and it's just that kind of moment where my son's going to do good. This is kind of reflected in the mother's story that we also get in this issue, and the seeds are planted to what we already know from the future of this affair with an old school boyfriend, who she basically dumps for her husband that she has now, just because he saved her in some sort of accident. And again, it's just that inevitability of kind of furrowing the land. You know, you're just doing what is expected of you, what you think is the best fit that makes it an easy life. Oh, it's such an emotional book, and every time I pick it up I can't help but get kind of choked up with it. It's just an amazing read. Jeff Lemire doing some of his best work in this book. I can't wait for more issues of this and more work from Jeff Lemire. He is an absolute star. And that is it for this week. Thank you for watching. I hope you made it this far. That's it for this week. We'll have another comic book review video next Sunday. Please comment, like and subscribe. Let me know if you've been reading any of the books that I have and what are your thoughts and takes on them. Always love reading your comments. And I will see you very soon with a new stack of comics on Wednesday. And I'll have news about what's coming up next Friday. Look forward to that, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.